Okay, I think we're in. You can hear Winston in the background. My apologies, but he really wants to be part of this conversation. I just want to thank you all for joining us tonight. We have hosted a number of these town halls and will continue to do so on Wednesday evenings. If you are interested in seeing our previous town halls, you can go to our YouTube channel and see our past recordings that include Q&A, answers to some of the most pressing questions, but also critical information from so many of our local, state, and federal partners to assist in the recovery process. Tonight, we have with us from FEMA, Peter Lopez Santiago. From U.S. Army Corps, we have Colonel Saucer. From Cal OES, we have Eli Owen. From Caltrans, we have Lauren Welke. From California Department of Insurance, Rob Obadoza. From LA County Public Works, Chris Shepard and Ken Zimmer, dynamic duo. LA County Sheriff Captain C2. LA County Public Health Dr. Nicole Quick. LA County Assessor's Office. From that office, we have Scott Thornberry and Jeff Meyer. We're joined by a whole host of other partners as well, and we thank you for being with us tonight. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Lauren from Caltrans.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me tonight. My name is Lauren Wallachy. I'm a public information officer with Caltrans. And if there's any questions that need answering, I'm available to answer them. Thank you.
Okay, is there any information you wanted to share first, Lauren, or you just want to do it in a Q&A format?
I mean, I think the biggest information that I can share right now is mainly about our storm preparation. We have been clearing storm drains as well as catch basins to make sure those are ready for the upcoming rain this week and then into next week as well. We also placed some K-rail and sandbags, and we're going to have crews out in the field monitoring all of the highways and lanes just for any potential debris or anything like that as we have these storms coming in. So that's kind of our.
You gave some guidance recently about PCH. I see we have a graphic up here. So what's going on at PCH today?
Yeah, so for PCH remains the same in terms of who's allowed in the closure. We have crews driving up and down, monitoring kind of the situation there, and we're just staying prepared for the storms that are coming in and have everyone in place to be prepared.
And for those who might not know the latest guidance, who is allowed on PCH and what guidance have you given?
Yeah, so for right now, the people who are allowed on PCH include residents in the burn scar areas, contractors, emergency, obviously, and I think those are the main groups right now. I think school buses are allowed, and some of those metro buses as well. So those have not changed. It's been the same people allowed in as have been allowed in for, I believe, the past couple of weeks. So no changes there.
Okay. And I know we've, as the image shows here, there's also been some boulder removal that your teams have been working on with us that have been impacting Topanga Canyon as well. So we appreciate your partnership in that work. I know it's critically important. I'm going to jump to our Public Works dynamic duo. How would you like to update us with regard to our preparation for rain and where we are with the current events?
There we go. Unmuted. Sorry about that. Okay. So just give me a second. There we go. Okay. So just to give you the latest storm summary, as you probably noticed, though, light rain continued. It kind of dropped off from what the earlier forecast was. So we're looking at about 1/10 to an inch along the coast and valleys of rain and 1 to 2 inches in the foothills. We're expecting the intensities only to be between 1/10 and a third of an inch per hour for the rest of this storm. and less than 10% chance of thunderstorms, which is good. This is takes about a half-inch per hour intensities to get mud flow moving, so this should keep mud flow at a minimum. Snow levels are going to drop to 3,500 feet for any skiers out there. As far as the mud flow forecast, we originally forecasted a phase 1. We had higher intensities above half an inch. But the latest that we had this afternoon with the National Weather Service, we called for a no phase for all the fire areas at this point for the rest of this storm. So that's it. That doesn't mean you won't see maybe some mud flow, small mud flow out of the canyon and along the road, but it should be minimal and unlikely to endanger any structures. As far as public works is concerned, we'll be running 24/7 storm patrols for the rest of this storm. And all protective measures have been safeguarded in the communities, and they remain in place. We did go out after the last storm to look at the sandbags and the K-rails, and we made any adjustments we felt were necessary to ensure the safety of the properties and the safety of lives. We're still collaborating with state and local partners, City of Los Angeles and Malibu, to protect public properties and make sure everybody's safe. And that should be, I believe, it for me. I just want to mention that we do provide mud flow engineering advice for any properties or homeowners that feel that the properties might be in risk of mud and debris flow. You can call 1-800-933-0930, 1-800-933-0930, and we'll make an appointment for you and we'll come out and check your properties. And that's it for me.
All right. Anything else you wanted to add, Chris?
Just a brief update on ROE processing. We've received more than, I think we're at over 4,000 applications from the Palisades area. We continue to process ROEs every day. We're submitted over 2,300 ROEs to the Army Corps to move forward with debris removal, and we're continuing to ramp up activities there. We're moving into a case management model with our call center. So I know a lot of folks have questions about specifics of their ROE status. So we have made updates to the GIS ROE viewer, so you can see more information about the status of your ROE. And then if you call into the call center, we'll be able to connect you with a case manager to help work through specifics of your ROE. So we want to just continue to remind people of the current deadline of March 31st to get those ROEs in. Highly recommend participating in the government program if you're, to get the debris removed from your property and submit that ROE. So.
Well, ROEs are a hot topic. We've heard a lot of concern that thousands have been submitted, but not the entirety has been handed over to the Army Corps. So I know that you are working on getting more of them over, but can you explain what is going on in that process, a little bit more about the back and forth and what takes so long for them to go from your custody to the Army Corps?
Sure. Yeah, that's great. And I know, to demystify the process a little bit. So what we're doing is actually not just a simple, approve the form and stamp it and send it over to Army Corps. We're actually doing ownership verification, which is very important to protect homeowners from potential fraud and make sure that all the appropriate owners that have authority to grant rights to the government for access to the property are signing those documents. So the more complex the ownership arrangement of the property, the longer it takes to review. We have a lot of complex trusts, limited liability companies that need to be checked. And so we've done a lot of work to find, ways to speed that up and to do it, but we still have to do that ownership check thoroughly and make sure that we're actually verifying that ownership before we send it over to the core. Another thing that we do is, if you'll recall, a lot of the forms that were submitted early on were MS forms online, and so there was no way to upload and attach documents. So a lot of folks have been very proactive and submitted documents in multiple manners through the new form, through the email, in person at the DRC. So a lot of work has been done to consolidate those records together and make sure that all the information that's been submitted is actually with each person's application packet. And so that's taken some time to compile all that information together. And then really the final step. So once we've verified the ownership and everything looks good and is aligned up with the ownership of the parcel, then a DocuSign is sent out to folks. And so that DocuSign then needs to be signed by the owners and returned. So we do have about 1,000 documents out right now for DocuSign for the owners. And so we want to put out there to please do check your emails, check your spam folders, look for emails from dpw.lacounty.gov, from ROE@dpw.lacounty.gov, and be sure to respond to those emails in a timely manner. Get those DocuSigns signed and in. We do know there have been some issues with the names on the DocuSign form. So if you submitted an ROE as, say, Bill, but your name is William, or Antonio or Tony, and your name is Antonio, and then that is the name that gets put on your DocuSign. But then when you try to put your license, your driver's license, which has your full name, into the DocuSign, it may reject it. And so if that happens, if you're having trouble with your DocuSign, please call the hotline, the fire removal hotline, and we'll get you in touch with a case manager that can help work you through that. And if a name change needs to be done, we'll make a change and get you the DocuSign right back out to get that fixed. So those are a few of the things that we've experienced over the last couple of weeks. And so want to kind of, again, shed some light on that. And we've been putting fixes in place every time something like that comes up. We appreciate everyone's patience as we work through this process. We know it's a lot to go through, and it feels like just, hey, a form should be simple and easy. So we understand the frustration, and we just want to work with everyone to get these done as quickly as possible. So
I know some of it is new information for the county to collect that the U.S. Army Corps needs. So if it didn't get held up with us, it would get held up with them. And so it's best that we just do it all in one process. We've updated, as I understand it, the ROE forms. We've modified it in some ways based on people's feedback and some of these experiences. And I know you've also hired up in terms of contracted staff to work on processing more applications at the same time. But there is still some back and forth. One thing I've heard people get really frustrated about, though, is if they submit it, they just want to know that you got it and what's going on. So to avoid some of that multiple duplication of I submitted it by email and in person because I just don't know if they got it. Like, how are you letting people know that that you got it and that it's being processed, so they're not sort of living in limbo without information?
So the form now, if anyone submitted recently, it automatically replies and lets you know that it's submitted. But really the ROE tracker, status tracker, is the best place to look for that. It's constantly being updated every day as applications are processed. And so you can actually see your parcel move from the orange status to the yellow status if more information is needed, and then to the green status if it's been passed on to the Army Corps. And then if you click on that parcel, which, say a yellow parcel on that tracker, it will give you a more detailed breakdown now of what may be the issue with your ROE where more information is needed. So if you have a trust document issue, or if it's a signature issue, or if you're missing your identification, those will now be issues that you can see on that yellow status. We have had a few folks tell us that hey, my parcel doesn't show up at all. I submitted a paper copy and it's no color on the website. So if you're seeing that, we encourage you to call in to the hotline to talk to a case manager. You could also visit the DRC, and the staff there now have electronic access to upload documents immediately and get it submitted in the system. And you'll see the status change within 24 hours if you're not currently on the dashboard. So,
And is the hotline the debris removal hotline, 844-347-3332?
That's correct.
All right. So if you have lingering questions about your ROE, you're not getting the information on the platforms that Chris mentioned, you got to give them a call so that way we can square it up for you and get it right. Okay. I'm gonna jump over to Captain C2. I think she's on with us this evening. Captain C2, I see you there, and I would love to welcome you with us tonight. I know that we heard from Caltrans. I'd love to hear from you about what your station has been doing to prepare. I know there's always interest around the PCH, everyone's favorite topic, and so would love to hear the latest from you. Welcome.
Great. Thank you, Supervisor. Thanks for having me. So many of you know that we have multiple passes out there. And I know that this has been a bit frustrating, but we've worked with, thankful for the supervisor's office. You guys took the lead on this and working with LA City to make one unified pass. That way it's not confusing and all the other passes still work. So the green pass that we gave, the prior LA City pass, but we wanted to do one uniform pass that had all the patches on it. And so that's what you'll see now. But again, your passes still do work. So that's one change that we kind of made. And then another is, yes, we are preparing for the rain event. We looked at it today and, we were kind of going back and forth, and I'm thankful that it went from a phase 1 to a 0 phase. We had already started our phase 1, knocking on doors and telling people, hey, your property is in a phase 1, but we're happy.
Now, this isn't debris removal phase 1 to phase 0. This is a different, this
Oh,
is
I'm
phase 1 and
sorry.
wet weather. We're using similar terminology, so I want to make sure we're really clear. Tell me what phase 1 is.
I'm so sorry. So sorry, everybody. So for the rainstorm phase 1, so we have different phases, right? So we're in a rain 0 phase right now, which means we're going to expect light rain, but we're not going to do any evacuation warnings or orders. Then we go into a phase 1 and we look at the maps and we look at where debris and mudslides could actually impact a parcel. And then we'll decide, we'll work with Caltrans, we'll work with Public Works and decide if they're going to be an evacuation warning or order. And then, so it has 3 different phases. So our
We were
last
in
one
today.
today.
We were in phase 1 today. Until
Yes, and then we went to a phase 0. So my apology for that. I'm focused on rain. So
Yeah.
my apologies.
Oh, that's what we're here for, to make sure we're getting clear communication. And I know you're out there watching this current weather event to make sure that you're keeping people safe. And I know that you'll let us know if you're seeing conditions, both with our partners at Caltrans, that need to change what the current status is. But now that we've gotten to this streamlined pass process where everybody can have a unified pass, and we know who can get them and where they can get them at multiple locations, I think that has gotten better. But now when the weather impacts come, that's when we have to watch out and see if we have to make any changes. And what's going on with Topanga Canyon?
So Topanga Canyon is still it's still a hard closure. I know that we have Caltrans on, they are still working on cleaning up Topanga Canyon. So I foresee that Topanga Canyon is going to be closed for a while. And I know Caltrans can speak better to that, but it's definitely closed.
Lauren, can you give us any insight as to what's going on with Topanga Canyon? What Caltrans projects in terms of accessibility? I know our residents in Topanga are just getting it real hard right now. It's the businesses are getting impacted with the wet weather. That's challenging. I know we've been working on undergrounding utilities in Topanga, so that utility work makes a challenge. So what can you do to help us? We saw the boulder that had to be worked on. So what else is going on? And what's the timeline for them to get back to an easier way of travel?
Absolutely. So right now, we do not have an estimated time for reopening. You mentioned some of the things that we're working on Topanga right now, and we continue to work with all of our partners to get that debris removed, working with utilities and stuff to make sure that it is safe before we decide to reopen. So right now, safety is our top priority, and making sure that we're prepared for, the upcoming storm should that cause any more future impacts.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I know that we're in that with you. And there is a sense of urgency about reopening, because if people feel like they're stuck and they can't get out, then that all with this wet weather and conditions that people face, that also becomes a challenge. So we have to move swiftly, safely, but with all deliberate speed, because people really need that access. And I'm hearing you loud and clear, Topangans.
Absolutely. And, Caltrans remains committed to opening as swiftly and as safely as we can.
All right. So our first actual question from the community, thanks for letting me do that a little bit, because sometimes we got to drill down to make sure we're getting real specific. Where can I go if I have the questions for the if I have questions for the county about the rebuild process? So I'm going to start with our public works. I know that we have a one-stop center up in our area in Calabasas. So maybe somebody from Public Works can join in. Oh, okay. Hi, Rochelle.
Hi, Supervisor. How are you?
Good.
So I'm happy to announce that we have been well underway in the Calabasas One Stop Center with collaborative efforts with all our departments, and have had workshops, individualized workshops for each individual homeowner. And when you make these appointments that are available through recovery.lacounty.gov, you come in and each department has already done the research on your property. We have all of your assessor records, your past permit records, and can talk through with you and your design professionals, if you already have them on board, to understand what we're going to be looking for those plans. So when you're ready to submit, it should be a very quick process. We're also committed to a 10 business day turnaround for that first review in building and safety, and a 5 business day turnaround for resubmittals. For anything that's less complex, we can do potentially over the counter. So we're looking at a very expedited process to get everybody back home.
Okay. Our next question, I know people have their plans that are ready to go, so I'm glad to hear that progress. Next question, how long will phase 2 debris removal take? Now that we're a couple months in, do we have a better assessment of how long it's going to take? And is there anything that residents with homes that are still standing, is there anything they should know about the timeline that's different than if your home is no longer standing? Colonel Saucer, I'll turn it to you. I know you're tricking me there. It says Swenson, but I know it's Saucer. So.
Oh, I got to change the name. Sorry about that. S's and W's. We both have that in our names. My apologies. Yeah. So Colonel Brian Saucer, Commander Emergency Field Office out here in the Palisades. That's for the Pacific Palisades, the unincorporated areas in Malibu. So we've actually built out quite a bit over the past week. So just to kind of give you an example, just this time last week we had 20 crews working just debris removal. There's also crews that work asbestos testing, asbestos abatement. There's site assessment crews that are there. There's tree crews. There are erosion control crews. So there's many different types of crews. The ones that are most visible are the heavy machinery doing the debris removal. We had 20 last week this time. We had 35 today. We're starting to average about anywhere from 15 to 20 homes cleared per day. And we want to start hitting above 20 every day. And so we're continuing to still in that ramp up phase. But I think in about another month, we'll be peaking. So to the specific question, we really believe within the next 5 months, we'll have the bulk of the debris removed from the affected areas here in the Palisades fire. I say the bulk because there's a lot of challenges on the backside of that are the great unknown. So we're seeing a more high opt-out rate or no decision rate over here in the Palisades versus the Eaton fire, which is not a surprising. So we don't control those timelines. So those are being done privately in many cases. And so that's part of the variables. And then there's of course, there's still some of the legal issues with some of the ROEs that Chris Shepard talked about earlier that pose some challenges. And then lastly, the last bucket that has some uncertainty to it is there's some challenging engineer problems with some of the debris removal. We are not doing easy to hard. We're doing everything at the same time. So we're not avoiding hard properties. We're doing some very complicated properties up in the canyons in Malibu and up in the hills of the Palisades right now. But I would say, to answer the question in generality, I wish I could give you a day. I still can't give you a day, but I'm very confident that you're going to see the vast majority done within the next 5 months. And then we're going to have some hard problem sets at the back end of that. The promise is still January of 26. And I know that frightens a lot of people, but I think for the vast majority of people, it'll be before that date. It'll be within the next 5 months. I hope that answers the question.
And specifically for people who still have their home standing, any different kind of consideration that they should take into account?
Yeah. So, and I just had a homeowner yesterday. Lynn, we talked in the American Legion. Actually, it was this afternoon, and that is a challenging situation for those that have a standing home. So, for standing homes, they most often will not be eligible for the FEMA's program that allows the Corps to come in to perform any sort of debris removal. We don't offer remediation services, but what we are trying to do is we are still trying to maximize our assets where we can to start, pushing debris away from standing homes or clearing those areas near standing homes. We're still on an optimization model right now, but we are looking at prioritization for homes like that. We're not quite there yet in terms of having enough assets, enough crews to focus on those. But we acknowledge the concern in terms of remediation and protection that you might want to take and some considerations with your insurance. I won't answer those questions, but I know some fantastic professionals on this call that can.
Yeah, I know I think we have heard guidance in the past that insurance companies often are able to help you connect with remediation services. I know some people want to wait until phase 2 is completed around their property. And if you have the ability to do so, of course, is another part of that question. But some people are being encouraged to get back into their homes, and whether they have access to utilities and other things is another story. So are you prioritizing phase 2 debris removal with standing houses in mind at all, or is that not a factor for how you're considering debris removal?
It continues to be a factor. We're working in county with that. I will tell you the environmentally sensitive areas are really kind of the main priority right now. So if you look along the coastal properties on PCH, if you look at anybody that's near a watershed or a stream, we are prioritizing those. And so that's kind of our focus right now. We do have a stepwise prioritization plan that we've worked out with our contractor, and standing homes that are surrounded by destroyed homes are on those. We haven't had enough assets to start flexing towards those priorities yet, but as this continues to build out and we get more crews, we'll increasingly do that.
Okay. And remind us where they can go to see the progress that you're making. I know there's a map that they can track where you've been.
So we'll post that in the chat if that's okay. If everyone can see the chat, I'll ask. I got a colleague on here that can post that link on there because it's a lengthy chat. So I know there's a lot of viewers out there, and I do apologize, Supervisor, for the folks. They are all linked from recovery.lacounty.gov, and that will link us to our viewer as well as the county's viewer. So I would suggest that's probably the best location to go. We could give you our direct URL, and we'll put that in the chat. But I would still encourage to go that one single source website that the county created.
Yeah, so for people who can see the chat, we'll put it there. For those who are just listening in or who are watching this after the fact and can't see the chat, go to recovery.lacounty.gov. Okay, next question. Still for you, Colonel. What do you advise for those who are deferred to phase 2 from phase 1? So phase 1 deferred into phase 2. How does that process work? This person is particularly scared about hazardous waste sitting on their home for an extended period of time. So that's
an excellent question, and we've been working on that since EPA concluded their mission pretty feverishly. I will tell you that just today we cleared out the last of the EV and the power strips in the houses in the Palisades impact area. So that was a significant milestone for us. Those are the known EV and power strip locations. Certainly, as we move through this, we will discover vehicles potentially that were on a second-story garage that collapsed in. So we're not done with EVs and power strips. We know that we'll probably see a few more out there, but of the known EVs and power strips, those are complete. 2, household hazardous materials. Those are the materials that the EPA was collecting up until the end of their mission. We did take that on because they were deemed unsafe properties. We're clearing about 200 to 250 of those properties a day. We had about 2,000 to go. We're about halfway there right now. So I wish I could post a symbol. You'll start seeing 2 signs in front of yards. One will say EPA cleared. This is a 8.5 by 11 kind of normal sheet of paper. And that'll say EPA cleared. That was done during their work. You're now starting to see a lot of signs on those unsafe properties that show the core symbol with ECC. And so we're rapidly moving through those properties. We do believe in the next few weeks we'll have those complete. Like I said, we're doing about 200 to 250 a day. And some of the more challenging, engineering challenging or safety challenging sites, we're doing those simultaneously too. So we're doing coastline properties, hillside properties, properties in neighborhoods that were unable to be gone into by the EPA. So Supervisor, we're working really quick on that. I think in the next 2 weeks, we'll have those cleared of household hazardous materials.
All right. And as it relates, Colonel, to foundation removals for hillside properties in particular, will you be removing any concrete piles or anything associated with that foundation removal process?
Yeah, so caissons, concrete pilings, or any footers or retaining walls that look like they're maintaining any sort of slope stability, we will not remove. So if a property owner elects for us to take their foundation, we will look at that foundation during an engineering site assessment, and then we do it again in a 360 review where we walk around with several structural engineers. We look at that property and we assess what we can take safely, and then what we think is even in question, we will tell the property owner we won't take. So for those that are in hillside properties, on slope or tiered properties, caissons, pilings, anything subsurface that's on an incline, we're going to take a hard look at that, and likely we will not take that portion of the foundation.
Okay. So then what? What do they have to work with their insurance company to find out somebody who can remove that?
Typically during the building process, you're going to have to do that, because if those features are holding up part of the hillside, during the building process, they would have to remove and then immediately in place, because it is providing slope stability, likely on a very dry day that's been in very dry conditions for a long time. They would do that during the building process. So specifically how that would be worked with an insurance policy, is that still debris? Is that part of the rebuild? I'm not exactly sure. It would depend on the insurance policy. I know it adds to the complexity, but due to the safety of residents around them, we have to ensure that slope is maintained.
And if those components are left for the reasons that you stated, do they pose any sort of risk as sort of uncontrolled debris until they move to that phase? Or is it just something that's a leftover component that is no longer a threat that the Army Corps addresses? That basically after you've come in and completed phase 2, except for those components, it's no longer a concern?
So in terms of a public health threat, no, it's not a concern. So we're going to still take that down try to get to 6 inches if we can safely. So we would do it like a flat cut on it, but we would keep the subsurface piece of that, because that's actually of benefit from an engineering standpoint to the greater community. So
Sure.
subsurface structures like that, we will leave in place. In terms of the public health threat, that surface piece of it, we may take the surface piece of it if it can be safely taken. And in most cases, we're still going to take 3 to 6 inches. We're going to go to 6 inches if we can. I will tell you, most of the subsurface that we see in non-slope areas, in the Palisades area specifically, there's some very, very deep footers. We've gone down as much as 4 feet to take a footer out in many residencies here in the Palisades. And so, again, we're going to go pretty deep and take the entirety of your foundation if we can. If we can't take the entirety of your foundation due to slope stability concerns or other safety concerns, then we won't. But we will always take the public health component, Supervisor.
All right. And I think, that's obviously a concern. The reason we are so interested in moving this process along is really for health and safety, we know that leaving this debris out uncontrolled poses a risk to everyone in the community, the environment itself. So that's helpful to hear. Now, this question actually got asked earlier today and now is asked again here tonight. So help me understand how Army Corps interacts with insurance. My understanding is that if there's an insurance benefit left after a long period of time through this process, that you will only charge insurance at that point, and it's only what's left from your coverage. But if there's nothing left, will you charge somebody? Talk to me about how the Army Corps interacts with your insurance, because it's not it's at no cost, but they will contact your insurance. So let's get clear about what that is.
No, that's an excellent question, Supervisor, and I'll likely tee up County Public Works. Chris Shepard might want to backfill this, or if we have an insurance for folks. So dealing with your insurance, the Corps actually has no dealings with your insurance. We are not going to directly bill you from the United States Corps of Engineers ever, and we are not going to ask for money from your insurance. On the back end of this, when essentially the state of California is settling with FEMA on some of these bills, that is when the insurance is brought into the equation. So typically from county to state, that's the interaction of coming to the insurance and asking for debris riders that were on that insurance policy. But for those viewers today, I'm not trying to evade your question. The Corps really we have zero interaction with insurers. We perform the work, and then the county has our records that we perform the work. And there may be a collection later on, because the one principle is you cannot have duplication of benefits. So the Corps can't perform the work and then you receive some sort of monetary benefit or monetary compensation for debris removal. You can't have both. And so
Okay.
that's the general principle.
So Chris, what role are we playing at the county in that?
Yeah, so our role is to be that collector of that insurance proceeds at the end of the process. So that goes back to, in the ROE form, a lot of folks have seen and commented that one of the things you're doing in that right of entry form is assigning your insurance proceeds for debris removal specifically over to the county. And so once debris removal activities have been completed on your property, not before, and even after you've done your own debris removal, if there's other things you want to remove that may be ineligible, then there will be a claims process where the county comes back and asks you to provide any remaining debris removal specific insurance proceeds to the county to cover Army Corps' costs. So if there's something on your property that the Army Corps doesn't remove, like a pool in the ground or hedges or walls that are outside the ash footprint, you can work with your insurance company to do that removal, use your insurance money for that. And if that takes up your insurance benefit, then there is zero amount left that will be transferred to the county to cover the Corps' work at the end of this process.
Yeah, we know people have a lot of anxiety in this process, so I don't want people being anxious over worrying about for a number of years, because it takes us a long time to calculate and go back and forth in reconciling with FEMA. So what you're saying is people should go ahead and use their insurance benefits, and if nothing is left, then nothing is left. But if there is something left, you will collect it to make sure there's no duplication. Is that right?
You got it. That's exactly.
Now, Rob, you're gonna help me. You're gonna be better here. Tell me what we missed.
No, you really didn't miss anything. So yeah, as they had mentioned, part of the debris removal coverage would be paid out to the county for the debris removal program, but it can't go above what your debris removal coverage is. So if the expenses do exceed your debris removal coverage, it's still no out-of-pocket cost to the homeowner. I also linked in the chat the consumer alert that the commissioner put out a few weeks ago, detailing exactly how insurance interacts with the debris removal program. Basically, as we said, no out-of-pocket costs typically for homeowners, no duplication of benefits, as the Colonel has mentioned. So meaning, if your insurance carrier pays out your debris removal up front, and you use that for debris removal on top of the LA County debris removal program for the same type of debris, then, you'd have to pay some of that money back to the county. But as we also mentioned, if there's debris that after the Army Corps of Engineers does their thing and there's anything ineligible that's left over, they can still use those proceeds, and whatever remaining left over will go to the county.
All right. Dr. Quick, we have a question for public health. Is it safe to live in the immediate vicinity of burned homes? They put in parentheses, less than 250 yards during phase 2 debris removal.
Yes, good evening, and that's a great question. So I'll spend a minute just to talk about a public health advisory that we put out a number of weeks ago related to that 250 yards. And essentially, what we want people to be aware of is, baseline exposure to debris from the fires, ash and soot can contain contaminants and potential substances that could be harmful to humans. And that 250 yard essentially is saying that individuals who reside within 250 yards may be more likely to come in contact with that disaster debris, that fire debris, that ash and soot, and may be more likely to develop symptoms. We have also said in general that for some folks, it may be advisable to avoid being in an area until after phase 2 cleanup, because that really would minimize the potential of interacting with any of that fire debris.
Okay. That helps. I know you've given that guidance, so I appreciate that clarification. I'm going to go back to you, but with a different question. There's been a lot of discussion around the landfills, and this one is in particular about the Calabasas landfill. And I know Department of Public Health plays a role in operating the LEA, which is the enforcement agency that enforces all of the regulation that is supposed to keep people safe as it relates to our landfills. So this question, I know that phase 1 debris is not going there because it's not Calabasas landfill is not licensed to accept household hazardous materials. Do I have that right?
I'm going to answer this, and then we do have Shikari on here from LEA. But yes, so the distinction
That's not the main question. So let me say all
perfect.
of that.
Okay. Say the whole question. Yeah.
I want to make sure that we are very clear. Phase 1 is the household hazardous phase,
Yep.
and it's my understanding that phase is not going to Calabasas.
Right.
It's
Correct.
not. Okay, that's good. So phase 2 is really what we're talking about, which is after the phase 1 household hazardous process has been completed. So once the fire debris is at the Calabasas landfill, how far of a distance will toxins linger in the air and for how long?
Okay. Let me answer this just in general, and then if there's any questions, we do have other folks on here that can talk about the process. So I think the important part for folks to know on this, on the way phase 2 is conducted, at each step of the way, there are measures that are taken and sort of safety measures put into place to minimize the potential for any of this disaster debris from coming in contact, spreading, being distributed across the community as this cleanup is taking place. And that includes a number of methods that I think folks have heard at various times with wet methods and how that material is packaged and brought to the landfill. So once that is in the landfill does have various sort of best practices that take place every day as far as how that waste is received, how it is covered, and how it is managed. That landfill process, whether it's disaster debris coming in or regular waste, is meant to be done in a manner that minimizes the potential spread of that waste to surrounding communities. So I think that's the important part for people to know. And once again, the priority is to get this disaster debris out of neighborhoods and away from other folks, and that may be standing homes within the burn area or surrounding areas. We really need to get this disaster debris out of there so that we can move on with rebuilding and repopulating.
Okay, I heard a lot of, no offense, but a little bit of squishy language in there. I know that it's meant to be that way, but what this question is asking is specifically, will toxins linger in the air? And if so, for how long? And how will people be at risk? Like, help us understand, and I hear you, in a best case scenario, if all of these protocols are happening, we should be okay. But should is not the same as we will be. So
sure.
So from your perspective, and I saw Cal Recycle might want to jump in on this too. So
yeah, let me break this down a little bit and try to talk about the what's being picked up during phase 2 and what's being looked at, whether or not it's at landfill and or in the community where it's leaving. So I think efforts are being made to look at the potential fire debris, ash, soot. Essentially, some of the air monitoring that's taking place in the community is to try to answer that question, to answer the question of whether or not during the process there is the sort of redistribution of any of this ash and soot. And so that monitoring that's taking place in the communities and being posted on the AQMD's website is really looking at that question to answer that. So the same debris that's coming out and getting cleaned up in those neighborhoods is what's being transported into the landfill. When it's being transported into landfill, however, it's packaged up in an area where we would not be expecting that to be, you know, being made airborne. So to answer the specific questions of will toxins be in the air and for how long, let me talk about that for a moment as well. And I'm going to get in depth here. Cut me off if you don't want me to go here, but I'm going to try to explain some of the toxins that we may see from fire debris in a community and how that might be sort of potentially hazardous. Initially, when you have burning, of course, you've got distribution in the air of everything that's burning in these homes. And we saw these potentially heavy metals and other sort of contaminants that were in smoke and ash and soot that distributed. Once the initial fire's gone, what we're talking about largely is ash and soot that's in the community. Anytime there's a windstorm or a vehicle driving or somebody's cleaning up ash and soot in their home, there is the potential of that becoming airborne again and folks breathing it in, which is why we have a lot of the public health guidance out there on ways to minimize that. I want to make it clear that in general, when we're talking about some of the heavy metals and other components of those are not floating out in the air outside of being associated with particulate matter. So that's when you hear us talking about ways to minimize exposure to any of those potential heavy metals or other potential toxins. When we're talking about breathing those in, those would be associated with that particulate, which is why when we're monitoring that, that's one of the things we're looking at. So that was my long answer to try to get at how long those might be in the air and in what manner. We're trying to avoid the potential of redistributing those, and that's why that additional monitoring is taking place. Once that disaster debris is getting to the landfill, that is being put into a place in the landfill. And I do want to invite CalRecycle/LEA to speak specifically in Calabasas on how that waste gets into the landfill, but there are measures that are meant to keep that waste from potentially becoming airborne in any manner that would lead to the toxins that I think the person who's asking the question is concerned about.
Okay. Wes, I'll turn it to you.
Sure. Thank you, Supervisor. No, Wes Vinderman from CalRecycle. I just want to reiterate the environmental controls that Dr. Quick described. That, you know, the main concern here for exposure to the communities around the landfills is airborne particulates, and the wet method that the Corps is using, the sealing and tarping in the trucks for transport. And that sealing and tarping, you know, remains intact right up till right next to where it's disposed. And then when it comes out, the landfills have additional measures to control dust if it's observed, but typically it is not observed. In fact, I was at the Calabasas landfill yesterday and was observing their operation. I did not observe any dust coming from the active face where they were disposing of ash and debris. And then they cover that up every day at the end of the day with clean soil. So, you know, the main engineering controls there are to prevent those emissions, and Dr. Quick described them correctly.
So it sounds like the risk is greatest when this debris is dry and uncontrolled out in the environment, and that the airborne component is likelier to happen when it's in that form than when you go through the wet method that the Army Corps uses to collect it and then contain it. Is that right? Or do I have that right? Or is it all the same?
No, I'll speak from the operational standpoint. Yes, you're absolutely correct. When that debris is out there in the Southern California heat and sun and wind, and when it's very dry, that's where the emergency is, down in the recovery area. When it comes to the landfill, we've got those engineering controls to eliminate those emissions. And so again, as Dr. Quick described, you know, and from our perspective, there are no airborne emissions at the landfills. We're monitoring for that and ensuring that they don't happen.
And Shikari, if you could tell us, how do you know that the wet method was used in this, and that the debris that's coming in is not sort of this dry, in this dry form that makes it more of a risk to people? How are you monitoring that to make sure that that's not what's happening and that's not what's coming to the landfill?
Right, that's a really good question. So our inspectors visit the site, Calabasas and also Sunshine Canyon landfill as well. And we stay in contact with the operators, and, we take photos, making sure that the engineering control and operational control in terms of dust suppression to eliminate the dust is in place. So we monitor those practices. making sure the operator follows the best practices by conducting inspection and staying in close contact with the operators.
And Dr. Quick, is that process unique to Calabasas, or is the same thing happening at Sunshine, at Lancaster, at the Simi Valley, all of the landfills that have been designated? I think there's a list of 17 based on the state license.
Yeah, the process. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, Supervisor,
No,
I
go
can
ahead,
answer
Wes.
that question. Yeah, so
Okay,
so right now, yeah, there was a list of 17 landfills. There are currently 3 that are accepting waste from the debris area, and that process is the same at all 3 landfills.
Okay, that's good to know. So all 3 landfills are being treated the same. They're using the same method, and they're being contained in the same way, and they're all being monitored in that way. I know we have the LEA specifically for Calabasas on with us tonight, but that kind of process is happening at all of these locations.
Correct.
Okay. Public health. Do we still need to remain masked outdoors? What is the current status of air testing in the Palisades and in Topanga?
Yes, great question. And in general, there is not guidance right now coming out from public health for people to be masking outside all the time. What we want people to be aware of in general is things to consider when they're interacting with that fire debris, ash, and soot. So those would be the situations where we'd want folks to take additional precautions on masking, is if they're interacting with it, cleaning it up in your home. If you're in a neighborhood, you've gone back to your home to do something and your home is in a burn area, those would be times to consider masking. Related to the air quality questions right now, I would really urge folks to go to where the local data is being posted on the fire and the mobile monitoring and stationary monitoring on air quality. I will say right now, we're having rain right now, which tends to have a very nice cleaning effect on our air quality in the entire air basin. But related to the fire cleanup component, there is detailed and extensive monitoring taking place in both in the Palisades area as well as Eaton, for folks that want to take a look at the latest monitoring data on that one.
Okay. I know there are lots of questions about air quality, so that's helpful to know where people can go to get the information that you're tracking. And if they have questions, if they start to hear information that doesn't line up with what they're seeing on those sites that you just mentioned, what should they do?
Yeah, if there is any question related to that, if it's a question specifically on some other, area's website, reach out to them. There's different places for people to go and get air quality data, but also feel free to reach out to public health. We do have a phone number. We can put it in the chat for folks. You can get to it from the county's disaster or fire recovery page, as well as DPH's for specific questions related to air quality. We've got lots of information about cleanup and precautions on air quality on the county site as well.
All right. I'm going to take you off the hot seat for a minute. I'm going to turn over to our representatives from the insurance commissioner's office. Is it confirmed that people don't have to submit an inventory of all personal property lost to insurance?
So nothing has been confirmed or finalized yet. So basically, under current law, insurance companies are required to pay 30% of that contents coverage without an itemized list. Now, Insurance Commissioner Ricardo Lara, he's urged insurers to pay out more than the minimum 30%. And, we've seen companies already begin to do that, paying up to 50, 60, 70%, even sometimes 100% without the required itemized list. But, the commissioner set a deadline last week, I believe it was February 28th, for insurance carriers to respond to his request of paying out 100% of that contents coverage without that itemized list. And I don't have that information right now, but we should be releasing a list soon of which insurance carriers will be paying more than the minimum 30%, or actually a minimum of 75%, to tell you the truth. We should be releasing that very soon. So I'm going to link in the chat a link to where they can sign up for the updates for our consumer alerts to take a look at that. But also keep in mind that, although the commissioner can't require them to pay 100%, currently Senator Ben Allen is putting forward legislation, Senate Bill 495, called the Eliminate the List Act, which would require, after a total loss, insurance carriers to do 100% of that contents coverage without an itemized list. And the Department of Insurance supports that as well. But I'll link into the chat where you guys can keep up with updates, but that information should be released very soon.
Okay, and another question for you. The California Department of Insurance concluded that the California Fair Plan's approach to smoke damage claims violates the law, but will they enforce it?
So I don't know if we've officially put out any like guidance on the smoke damage. I know that's been an issue that's been coming up pretty frequently at these town halls and some of these meetings that we've had. And the fair plan, just like any other insurance option, they are beholden to the policy and the contract that you sign with them. And insurance companies are required to investigate the claims properly, including smoke damage, and not deny them outright or pressure homeowners into accepting less than they're owed. But in order for us to enforce and take action for those who are experiencing denials of smoke damage within the fair plan or any other insurance company, we need you to file a request for assistance with us and start going through the process so we can take action against those insurance companies who are not replying or who are not complying with the insurance policies that they signed with you. And again, the number for that is 1-800-927-4357. But also, I know a lot of people are having issues with the fair plan, and I just wanted to let everyone know, we are having that insurance workshop this weekend at the Skirball Center. We will have fair plan representatives there to be able to help you directly. So definitely drop by, make an appointment with us, and we can help you out.
And is there a link as well? I know you gave a number. Is there a link that people can go to?
Yeah, I can definitely do that as well.
Okay. Do you want to say it out loud just so anyone who might not see the chat?
You mean the phone number? It's 1-800-927-4357, but our website's also insurance.ca.gov.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Public Works, I'm going to come back to you. How long will permits take to receive for a rebuild?
Hello, thank you. That is a great question. So for the rebuild process, it will really depend on the responsiveness of the consultants and the design team from the constituent as well. But as I mentioned earlier, our expedited turnaround time will be 10 days, 10 business days from the time we receive the application, and then 5 business days for every recheck. So essentially, that could look like a very quick process within building and safety. I know planning also has their expedited turnaround times, as does the fire department. So it should be relatively quick, but again, depends on the availability of your design professionals to respond.
Okay. Well, I know that people are going to be very focused on this. And I know that I've heard some horror stories from before my time. So we're going to not repeat that and make sure that we are staying up to date with you and regional planning and fire. I know that Assembly Member Jackie Irwin fought to make sure that $4 million was included in the state's budget to increase staffing for exactly this purpose. And 4 million isn't a lot for our entire region, but it's a good start. And so we're going to be watching to make sure that you're hiring up, that you're using those resources, and that we're getting this done as quickly as possible. So if you're running into issues where you need to surface them to us, let us know. But in the meantime, you can rest assured that residents are going to expect that we are moving quickly and that we are prioritizing this work and that we're keeping it going while we're keeping everything else going, which I know is a lot. So
it is, but we want to prioritize getting them home as well. And I do understand that there are some awful stories out there, and we do not want to see that repeated either.
Okay. For our friends at SBA, can you confirm that there is a 60-day grace period after the March 10th application date for an SBA loan? Is that right?
So I'm waiting for specific guidance from our headquarters policy team. We typically do have a little bit of a grace period, but I want to make for certain that they're honoring 60 days before we say that publicly. With that said, though, I encourage people to not wait and plan on a grace period, but to please try to submit their applications for any of the physical disaster loans by the 10th, Monday.
All right. Well, we appreciate the help that you will give to make sure that anyone who does apply gets the assistance that they so desperately need. And we will continue to encourage folks as well, because it's March 5th. It's not March 10th. So we still have a couple more days to get those applications in. and to work with you all to make sure they're getting that assistance. Okay, this question actually is for me. How do I apply to the LA County Household Relief Grant Program? So you can go to lacountyrelieffund.com, and that has all of the information about a relief fund that we have stood up in the county. We seeded it with a little more than $30 million, and philanthropy has stepped up and provided, I think, 20 million more to help us get the support that is needed into residents' hands as quickly as possible. We know you're going through a process with FEMA. You're going through a process with SBA on the business side. You're going through your process with the insurance, and all of this is a process and it takes time. Our hope with this fund is that we are getting you resources quicker, that we're covering costs that these other resources don't provide, and that we're helping to ease the burden a little. We know that it's not going to cover everything, and certainly the grants that we are looking at, they could be up to $18,000 depending on the size of your family. We know that for many families, that doesn't cover anywhere near what you're looking at in terms of rebuilding your home and really rebuilding your lives. But we do know that we want to invest and we want to help ease the burden a little bit. And the more that we can invest with philanthropic support and other ways, we will continue to do so, because we know these resources are so critical at this time. All right, Army Corps, we're back to you. And this also may include some chiming in from Public Works. Can you please explain the new tree waiver option in the debris removal process? I understand there are lots of questions about trees. They're not only in the Altadena area. I know that they're over here on the west side as well. And so we want to understand this whole new tree waiver process that you have.
Yeah, so thank you, Supervisor, for the question, and you're rightfully asking Public Works as well, because they've been really hand in hand with us as we develop this tree waiver policy. So essentially, anyone that opts in will have the opportunity during an ROE submission, but also at the 72-hour notification, we will give a phone call from a human being notifying them we'll be on their property in 72 hours to begin debris removal. They'll have another phone call, and there can be a discussion at that point about tree removals. Same thing at the 24-hour mark. So the day prior, we'll have another phone call, and we will have a discussion with the homeowner, and we will bring up trees as well. And there's an ability to sign the tree waiver. And then the day of, before any work starts, there's a 360 walkthrough if the homeowner elects to be there, in which they can also submit a tree waiver. So the tree waiver goes throughout that process at the 72-hour mark, the 24-hour mark, and then the 360 walkthrough. And then there's a form that you're going to have to sign, because we're going to have a waiver form that essentially the owner would then elect not to have a tree removed. Now, a couple exceptions. So if a tree is in the fire ash perimeter, essentially adjacent to the house, immediately adjacent to the house, it's likely very severely burned. We consider that part of the fire ash debris. We will take the tree. If the tree is a hazard to our crew, or for some reason we simply cannot get on your property, it does not allow access to your property, we're going to talk to the owner about that, but we would have to take those trees to get to your property physically with equipment, or if there's a hazard immediate to our crew. Most of the trees in question that folks would like to have waived are outside of those considerations. These are trees that are outside the fire ash debris, could be in your front yard, could be in your backyard, could be in your perimeter. And those trees, when we go through our site assessment, are assessed by an arborist. And the way we assess those trees is our arborist would say that tree is a hazard greater than 6 inches in diameter, over 4.5 feet tall, and when it falls up to 1.5 times its length on the horizontal plane, could it hit somebody or your neighbor? That's considered a hazardous tree. Normally, before this waiver, we would mark that tree for removal because it's a hazardous tree as deemed by an arborist, that it could die within the next 5 years. Those are really the trees that are most of concern, and a lot of folks would potentially want to waive to have those not taken. I would say that that waiver does say that you're taking liability for that tree. You are acknowledging that our arborist has said that that arborist believes it'll die within the next 5 years. So the property owner then has responsibility for that tree. And I'll just hand it over to Chris to see if there's any gaps he'd like to fill in, or anyone else from Public Works, if that's all right, Supervisor.
Yes.
Yeah, no, Colonel, I think you covered it completely. Just I will say the tree waiver form is available to download on recovery.lacounty.gov under the phase 2 debris removal section of the website. You can also pick up hard copies in person at the DRC. As part of the ROE process, if you have trees that you want to save when you do the sketch on the ROE, if you want to kind of circle or denote those trees on your sketch that you're interested in saving, that's a good way to do it during the ROE process. But then you will need to have that form signed, as the Colonel said, as part of that contact with the Corps. So that was very thorough. Thank you, Colonel.
Colonel, back to you. Can you provide any insight into how you are prioritizing properties? I know we've been asked a couple of times about prioritizing properties that either might have an easy, you mentioned something earlier about easy to hard, but is there any other aspect into how you're prioritizing properties? I know specifically when we had the Sunset Mesa community meeting, they talked about wanting to work together as a community, and they're close to 400 homes all in one sort of compact area. And obviously this would apply in different parts of the Palisades and other areas. Just using them as an example, it helps them with resourcing issues for the rebuilding process if they're sort of able to move as a unit. So are you thinking about the debris removal process in that way? Or is it just sort of how, I know you talked about the environmental concerns that you're addressing. Just if you can give a little more insight into how you're doing that prioritization.
No, that's an excellent question, Supervisor. And if I forget, please remind me to circle back on Sunset Mesa, because a lot of great interactions with the Sunset Mesa community. I think that's a good example of a community that's really kind of bounded together to try to help get through this problem set. So in total, when we talk about the Palisades impact area and we talk about the Eaton impact area, we're balancing assets between those two. And I think everybody expects and acknowledges that that's going on. So there's effectively a proportional balance of assets in the Palisades and the Eaton area. So that's kind of where our first principles. Then when we look in the Palisades impact area, we look at Malibu, unincorporated Pacific Palisades. The vast majority of the impacted homes are in Pacific Palisades. And so, they're going to get a predominant of the assets just by sheer proportion. The unincorporated areas and Malibu are receiving assets. I will tell you, we've divided up the Palisades impact area into 6 zones. And for the past few days, we've had assets, crews working on homes in all 6 zones. And we suspect that we will be in all 6 zones now for the duration. And so I will tell you initially, this is mostly an optimization problem. As we ramp up our crews, we are dispersing those assets and trying to reduce the amount of time those assets move. So I think in initial stages of this, it's not a perfect science because when folks see that they have a green property on the county, the problem is behind those green properties, there's a story to tell. We might have an ROE that's been given to us by county, but we still need to do deferred property HHM, household hazardous material removal. We still have to do an asbestos check on that property. We have to do an asbestos abatement on that property, possibly. We have to do a site assessment on that property ahead of time. And then it goes into what we call the runway. And then you start your 72-hour notification, then your 24-hour notification, and then your day of execution. All that is in a green status. You almost have like an 8-day period behind that green status once we get you on what we call the runway. So right now it's an optimization problem. We had 35 debris crews, like I mentioned earlier today. We're optimizing their use to decrease their travel time. As we get more crews and as we get those more collection of ROEs, then we're going to get into a little bit more of the nuances of the prioritization that we talked about earlier. I will tell you today, and Chris Shepard has been a great partner in this with Public Works, and so is your office as well, Supervisor. As you know, we're kind of surging on the Pacific Coast Highway properties the best we can, and they're very complex legally. They're very complex engineering-wise. but we're trying to get after some of those environmentally sensitive areas first, and then we'll branch out from there to get after those community areas. We're taking particular assets to hit community areas. So the Palisades High School is now complete. We're at Marquez Elementary. We're moving quickly on Marquez Elementary. That'll be done in days, not weeks. And then we're moving on Palisades Elementary School. I'm walking that tomorrow to get Palisades Charter Elementary started. And then we're going to be moving on to the library. So we're trying to do everything at once. We're trying to disperse the assets. We do have some environmental considerations that are topping the prioritization list. And then we're going to move into some of those other considerations that we talked about earlier. Long answer. I hope I touched on most of your question.
And was there anything else you wanted to say about Sunset Mesa?
That's why I led with that. Thank you, Supervisor. So Sunset Mesa has been great. That's a good example. We talked to a lot of the communities there. The Homeowners Association, we're in great communique with them. We've had crews up in Sunset Mesa now for, I would say, over 10 days, and we typically have at least 3 crews up there. A crew on average in Sunset Mesa right now is taking about 1.5 days. So sometimes we get them done in 1 day, sometimes we get them done in 2 days. But we're moving along in Sunset Mesa, and my hat is off to Sunset Mesa because if you go to the county website, we have a lot of ROEs that came in from Sunset Mesa. So I think collectively, the informal channels really work there, and we work through those problem sets, and we're moving into additional communities. The next couple of days, we're going to be moving into Big Rock. We've been in the canyons already. We're off of the coastlines. We're on the coastline, but our presence will continue to continue to grow. We're hoping to get about 20 more crews on board before the end of the month. So we're about 35 today. I'd like to see us at 55 by the end of the month, and I'd like to get to 75, 85 the month after that.
Great. I want to come back to Captain C2 and Lauren from Caltrans. We have one more question from our Topangans. I know we talked a little bit about PCH already, but they also have questions about using Tuna Canyon and Las Flores, given the challenges with Topanga Canyon itself. Can you give us some insight into how you recommend commuting for our Topangans with relationship to Tuna Canyon and Las Flores? I know you already touched on PCH. Are you still with us, Lauren and Captain?
Yes, I'm here. So yes, literally every week we speak with Public Works and Caltrans to determine, can we open? We want to make sure, I always ask, is this just an inconvenience or is this a safety issue? And once they say safety issue, then we always make sure that we close the road. So right now that's where we're at. It's a safety issue. And so the roads will be closed, but that is something that we check every week. Lauren, do you have any anticipation of when that will be open? I know Topanga is long-term, but I haven't heard that Tuna Canyon or Las Flores is long-term. So I'd love to hear from Caltrans on that one.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you kind of mentioned, safety is our #1 priority. So we don't have an estimated time of reopening right now, but we are, assessing, and as soon as it is safe to open, we will do so. And yeah, I just want to thank everyone in the community for their patience as we kind of continue to assess and make adjustments as needed.
What's the issue for Tuna Canyon and Las Flores? I know we have a sense of what's going on PCH, but what's going on there?
I can't really speak to those specific roads right now, but I can find out that information. And if they have specific questions, I believe there is an email in the chat. And so they can always reach out to that email. Let me see what that is. So I can share that with everybody who is watching this later.
And if you could say it out loud too, please.
Yeah, it's going to be topanga@dot.ca.gov. So if they have further questions, we'll be able to answer that through that email.
Okay, because I'd really like to make sure we all understand what you're contending with there, because what if it's a resource issue that we can help with, whatever it is, we need to move fast on giving them some ways of getting around. It's incredibly challenging for parents who are trying to get their kids to school. I know the PCH is on again, off again in terms of with the weather, but also even when it's open, it's slow because of everything else that is going on there. So we, to the extent that we can give them some relief, I know it would be really appreciated.
Absolutely. And we continue working with our partners. Obviously, this is not just, a Caltrans decisions or a Caltrans issue. We continue working with everyone in public works, with the county, obviously, and with all the law enforcement agencies. So we appreciate our partnerships with all of them as well.
Okay. Well, with that, I know that recovery.lacounty.gov is sort of a good clearinghouse that has a lot of information that takes you to contact information and ways to contact a lot of people here tonight. Of course, if you didn't get your question asked and answered here tonight, please reach out to my office so we can help follow up. I know there were some questions in the Q&A that were city specific, and I know that those are best answered by the city, whether it's, with regard to the LADWP questions and things like that. So we'll work to make sure we get those answered for you. But I really appreciate everyone participating here tonight. Once again, want to repeat recovery.lacounty.gov. I thank all of our partners who are here sharing information with us every Wednesday, making sure people are informed and getting the support they need and deserve. I wish you all a good evening.